The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow over the cemetery, but even the morning light could not pierce the darkness in his heart. Jonathan Mercer, a billionaire who had conquered the world with his wealth and power, walked slowly between rows of cold, silent gravestones. His expensive tailored suit felt heavier than usual, as if every thread carried the weight of his grief. Money, success, and accolades could not fill the emptiness inside him, the hollow left by the loss of his only son, little Ethan. He paused, in front of a small white marble stone engraved simply, Ethan Mercer, 8 years old. Jonathan's hand trembled as he traced the name. The memory of his son's laughter, bright and innocent, filled his mind. The times Ethan had run into, his arms, the way he would light up every room, the countless promises Jonathan had made as a father, all shattered in a single moment of tragedy. His chest tightened, and for a moment he wished money could undo the past, could turn back the clock, could bring back that smile. Jonathan knelt beside the grave, the gravel crunching softly under his polished shoes. He closed his eyes, imagining his son playing, imagining the future they would never have. He felt a deep, raw ache, a reminder that no fortune could protect the heart from loss. A tear escaped and ran down his cheek, unnoticed by anyone but himself. In that silent morning, surrounded by rows of lives remembered, he felt utterly alone. Yet, in the stillness, something shifted. A soft sound reached him. Not the wind, not birds, but a quiet, muffled sob. Jonathan's brow furrowed. Curiosity mingled with caution. Who else could be here at this hour, in this sacred place of mourning? His instincts told him to walk away, to leave the grief for himself, but something in the sound pulled him forward. As he approached, he noticed her, a young woman, shoulders shaking, clutching a small child to her chest. Her face, streaked with tears, radiated desperation and pain. Jonathan stopped in his tracks. Something in that sight made his own grief feel less solitary and yet more profound. This was no ordinary encounter, and in that moment, the billionaire realized that sometimes the universe places strangers in our path to teach us the most unexpected lessons about love, loss, and life. Jonathan stayed frozen for a moment, watching the young woman rock the child gently, whispering words that seemed to float into the morning air. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down the little one's hair, her face buried against his shoulder. He wanted to look away, to respect her privacy, but something compelled him to step closer. A strange pull, like fate had led him here, to witness this quiet, private heartbreak. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice almost swallowed by the cemetery's stillness. The woman's head shot up, her eyes wide, red from crying. She clutched the child tighter, shielding him as though he were a treasure she could never afford to lose. I'm fine," she stammered, her voice breaking. "He's just sick, and I don't know what to do." Jonathan's heart clenched. She wasn't just a stranger. She was a mother in pain, holding her child against the uncertainty of life. He understood the fear, the helplessness. For all his wealth, he had known this terror in his own way. When he had watched his son's life cut short, the connection was instant, raw, unspoken. "My name's Jonathan," he said carefully, kneeling down so that he was closer to her level. "And I know what it feels like to feel powerless, to be desperate for someone to help. Can I help you?" Her gaze softened, but suspicion lingered. "Why would you care?" she whispered. Jonathan looked at the child, then at her tear-streaked face, and realized that sometimes grief recognized grief, even across the boundaries of wealth and status. "I lost someone too," he admitted, his voice low but steady. "My son, I wish I could have done more. Maybe I can help you now." For a long moment she stared at him as if trying to measure the sincerity behind his expensive suit and calm tone. Then, slowly, she handed him a crumpled note. It was a hospital, bill unpaid, demanding and threatening. Her voice barely audible, she explained, "I'm a waitress. I make just enough to survive, but he needs this treatment and I can't afford it. I've tried everything. Jonathan felt a familiar surge of helplessness, but this time it was tempered with purpose. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his checkbook, not as a gesture of charity, but as an act of understanding, of connection. "We'll fix this," he said firmly. "You won't have to face this alone." Her eyes widened, disbelief mixing with relief. The child, sensing the tension lift, let out a small giggle, breaking the heaviness in the air. Jonathan smiled for the first time that morning. He realized that grief didn't have to isolate you. It could connect you, could ignite action, could remind you of what truly mattered. She finally spoke, her voice steady but soft. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," he said gently. "Just promise me you'll keep fighting for him. That's all the thanks I need." As he handed over the note, he felt something shift inside him. The encounter wasn't just about helping a stranger. It was about redemption, about discovering the power of empathy, about understanding that even in the depths of loss, one could make a difference. Jonathan stood looking at the woman and child with a newfound respect. The sun had climbed higher, scattering light across the cemetery, reflecting off the marble gravestones like hope itself. He knew this was the beginning of something larger, not just for them, but for him too. For the first time since his son's death, he felt a spark of purpose. A mission to honor the life he lost, not in wealth or power, but in action, in love, in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. And in that quiet, sacred moment, amidst the lingering shadows of grief, Jonathan Mercer realized that sometimes the universe gives you a second chance to be the person you wish you had been. Jonathan couldn't shake the image of the waitress and her child from his mind. He walked away from the grave, but the weight of the encounter pressed on him like a storm cloud he could not outrun. Back in his sleek black car, he stared at the hospital bill, the numbers almost meaningless to him, yet so crushing for her. He thought of his own son, gone too soon, and felt a surge of determination. This time he would do something. He picked up his phone and called the hospital. Calm but firm, he arranged everything: the treatment, the tests, the medications. Every detail, every bureaucratic obstacle he cut through like a blade. By the time he hung up, the weight in his chest had shifted. He had moved from helpless observer to active participant. He was no longer just a grieving father. He was someone who could transform despair into hope. The next morning, Jonathan returned to the cemetery. The woman was there again, her child, playing quietly at her feet. She didn't notice him at first. Jonathan approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "I've taken care of it," he said softly. Her eyes went wide, disbelief and hope warring across her features. You did?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Tears welled up again, but this time they were tears of relief. "Yes," Jonathan said, kneeling to meet the child's eyes. "Your son is going to be okay." The child looked up at him with innocent wonder, and Jonathan felt an unexpected warmth in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since the day he lost his own child. The waitress looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," he replied. "Just live. That's all I ask. Fight for him, love him, and never give up." For the first time in days, the morning felt alive, filled with possibility instead of sorrow. Jonathan realized that grief could be transformed into purpose, that loss could teach empathy, that pain could be the bridge to action. He had learned this painfully, but now he could offer it freely to someone else. They walked together out of the cemetery, the child toddling between them. Jonathan didn't speak much, letting the silence carry the weight of shared understanding. He watched the mother's shoulders relax, the tension ease from her face, and he felt a quiet triumph, not in wealth or power, but in humanity. As they parted ways, the waitress turned back. "I'll never forget this," she said softly. Jonathan nodded, a rare, genuine smile on his face. Neither will I, he admitted. In that moment, he realized that life was not about the fortunes you amassed, but about the lives you touched, the hearts you healed and the hope you restored. Driving away, he felt a strange lightness, as if a burden he hadn't known he carried had lifted. He thought of his son, and for the first time in months he whispered, "I will honor you, not by crying over what I lost, but by helping others who are fighting to hold on to what they love." Jonathan Mercer had learned that true strength was not measured in business empires or bank accounts, but in courage, compassion, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The encounter at the grave was no longer a moment of sorrow. It was a call to purpose, and he was ready to answer it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of quiet determination. Jonathan couldn't simply walk away from the woman and her child. Her plight had pierced something deep inside him, something he had long ignored, the knowledge that wealth without purpose was emptiness, that life's true meaning was measured by the difference you made in someone else's life. He tracked down the waitress, learning her name was Clara. She worked long hours, juggling the demands of her job and the responsibility of raising a child alone. Every corner of her life seemed stretched thin, fraying at the edges. But in her eyes, despite exhaustion, Jonathan saw a spark, a resilience that reminded him of his own son. He started small. A call here, a package there. Silent gestures that spoke louder than words. He arranged tutoring for her child, ensuring the little boy could thrive academically despite their financial limitations. He quietly paid overdue bills, medical expenses, and even helped fix their leaky apartment, all without fanfare. Clara noticed, of course, but she didn't know who to thank. The weight on her shoulders began to lighten, and for the first time, in months, she allowed herself to breathe. One evening, Jonathan invited her for coffee, not as a billionaire bestowing charity, but as a man wanting to understand, to connect. Clara hesitated at first, uncomfortable with the attention, wary of pity. But she agreed. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, the hum of life around them fading into the background. Jonathan studied her, noting the strength etched into the lines of her face, the careful precision with which she navigated life's challenges. "You're stronger than you know," he said softly. "And your child, he's lucky to have you." Clara looked down at her cup, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I do what I can," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes it feels like it's never enough." Jonathan leaned forward. "Life isn't about doing everything perfectly," he said. "It's about persistence. It's about choosing to rise, even when the weight of the world threatens to crush you. Your love is already more than enough. You just needed a little help to see it." Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. Jonathan taught Clara lessons that money couldn't buy. Planning for the future, trusting herself, making decisions that aligned with her values. He encouraged her to pursue a career path beyond waiting tables, to dream bigger than she had allowed herself to dream in years. Slowly, her confidence returned, radiating outward, touching every part of her life. One rainy afternoon, Jonathan arrived at Clara's apartment to find the little boy waiting by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Clara greeted him with a smile that seemed to carry the weight of newfound hope. "He's been asking about you," she said. "He likes to hear your stories about your son." Jonathan's heart tightened. Seeing the child's eyes light up reminded him of the fragility of life, the fleeting moments of connection that defined our existence. He realized that the legacy he had once measured in assets and buildings could now be measured in lives changed, hearts uplifted, and hope restored. He sat with them, sharing laughter, stories, and quiet moments of reflection. The bond grew stronger, not because of wealth, but because of shared humanity, empathy, and the courage to confront life's hardships head-on. Jonathan understood something crucial. Grief was not weakness, and help was not shame. By extending his hand, He had discovered a power far greater than money, the power to restore hope, to heal wounds that had festered in silence, and to create a ripple effect that would touch more lives than he could ever count. That evening, as he walked away from Clara's apartment, he glanced back at the mother and child, laughter spilling from their living room window. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt that the world could be brighter, kinder, and more just. His son's memory, once a source of unbearable pain, had become a guiding light, teaching him that the heart's true wealth is measured not in gold, but in compassion, courage, and the lives we choose to touch. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons when we least expect them. For Clara, the quiet, steady presence of Jonathan in her world began to shift everything. She had spent so long surviving, always looking over her shoulder at bills, deadlines, and the relentless demands of her job. Now she was beginning to see the possibility of thriving. Jonathan introduced opportunities carefully, never overwhelming her. He connected her with a mentor in a field she had once only dreamed of entering, a small cafe owner who had built a business from nothing. Clara listened, absorbed every word, and for the first time in years, allowed herself to imagine a life that wasn't just about making ends meet. Her son, witnessing her courage, began to mirror her newfound confidence. At first, the change was subtle. Clara started speaking with more certainty when taking orders at work. She smiled more often, even on days when exhaustion threatened to pull her under. Jonathan noticed these small shifts and offered encouragement. Every step forward matters. It's progress, not perfection, that creates change. One afternoon, as Clara walked home with her son, they stopped in a park she had never had the time or courage to visit. Watching the sunlight dance across the playground, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for years. She realized that Jonathan had given her more than financial support. He had given her a mirror reflecting the strength she had always possessed. Jonathan, meanwhile, was quietly transformed as well. He had spent years buried in grief, unable to reconcile the loss of his son. But helping Clara and her child reminded him that love and loss are not opposites. They are part of the same continuum. By lifting others, he honored the memory of his son in a way that brought purpose to his own heart. The community around Clara began to notice the change too. Colleagues at work commented on her calm confidence. Neighbors remarked on the light in her eyes, and her son's teachers were amazed at his sudden academic growth. What had once seemed impossible, stability, hope, and growth, was now becoming reality, one small step at a time. One rainy evening, Jonathan accompanied Clara to the graveyard where they had first met. This time, the mood was different. No tears of despair, no shadows of loss. Instead, they placed flowers together, a symbol of resilience and new beginnings. Clara knelt beside her child, explaining gently, "Life can be hard, but people like Jonathan remind us that kindness exists, even in the darkest moments." Jonathan watched her, a sense of fulfillment spreading through him. He realized that true wealth is not measured by accounts or assets, but by the impact one leaves on the lives of others. Helping Clara was not charity. It was an awakening, a chance to engage in a life that mattered beyond numbers and transactions. In the following months, Clara's life continued to transform. She enrolled in evening classes, determined to earn a degree and create opportunities for her child. Jonathan quietly supported her every step, never pushing, never judging, simply walking alongside her, offering guidance and belief. Her son, once shy and withdrawn, began to thrive socially and academically. He asked questions about the world, about dreams, and about the kind of man his mother admired. Questions that led to discussions filled with courage, ethics, and hope. Clara realized that she was not only shaping his future, but also rewriting her own narrative. Through it all, Jonathan learned a profound truth. Helping others heal doesn't erase your own pain. It transforms it. The grief that had once weighed him down became a bridge, connecting him to Clara, her child, and ultimately to a purpose greater than his own sorrow. That day, as they left the graveyard, the sky broke open with sunlight, warming their faces. In that moment, Jonathan understood that life's greatest triumphs are not the ones we achieve alone. They are the ones we build together. And together, they were building something extraordinary, a life infused with hope, resilience, and the quiet, unstoppable power of love. Clara's life had already begun to shift, but the real test was just ahead. With Jonathan's quiet encouragement, she faced opportunities she had once only dared to dream about. One morning, she received an invitation to manage a new cafe, one that promised growth, stability, and the chance to expand her skills. It was everything she had ever wanted, yet the fear of failure whispered in her ear. Jonathan sensed her hesitation. He didn't push her, but he shared his own story of loss and doubt. "I've lost more than I can count," he said softly. "And yet, standing here today, helping you, I've found more meaning than I could have imagined. Sometimes the courage to step forward is the same as the courage to heal." Her son tugged at her hand, eyes wide with trust. "Mom, we can do this, right?" he asked. In that moment, Clara realized that the leap was not just for her, it was for him too. She accepted the challenge, committing herself fully, and Jonathan promised to support her every step of the way. The first weeks were difficult. Mistakes were made, plans faltered, and moments of doubt crept in. But Clara remembered Jonathan's words: progress, not perfection. With resilience, she adapted. Each setback became a lesson, each small success a victory. Her son watched closely, absorbing her determination, learning that life's hurdles were meant to be faced head-on, not avoided. Word of her dedication began to spread. Colleagues respected her insight and calm leadership. Customers admired her warmth, and her community recognized her perseverance. Clara began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as a creator of possibilities, someone capable of shaping her own destiny. Jonathan observed from a distance, pride swelling in his chest. He realized that his act of kindness had unlocked a potential in Clara that no amount of wealth or influence could have bought. By believing in her, he had given her the freedom to believe in herself, and in doing so had found a path to his own healing. One evening, after a long day, Clara returned to the quiet graveyard where it all began. She knelt by her son's father's memorial, not with tears of sorrow, but with gratitude. She whispered softly, "We are stronger than we think. We can rise from anything." Jonathan stood nearby, watching the bond between mother and child, understanding that love and courage could rebuild even the most fractured lives. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with golden light, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. In that light, Clara saw her future clearly, a life of resilience, love, and possibility. She had taken the leap of faith, and for the first time in years, she felt truly free. Time had passed, and Clara had grown into a version of herself she had once thought impossible. Her cafe flourished under her care, and her son thrived in a world shaped by her courage. She had learned to carry her grief lightly, transforming it into purpose. Every decision she made, every small victory she celebrated was a testament to the power of resilience. Jonathan returned to the graveyard one quiet morning, the same place where their lives had intersected months ago. He found Clara and her son there, not in sorrow but in peace. They were planting flowers around the memorial, bright colors standing as symbols of hope and renewal. Seeing them, he felt a profound sense of closure, realizing that his son's memory had sparked something greater than grief. It had ignited a chain of transformation. Clara noticed him and smiled warmly, a smile free from fear, free from past sorrow. "You see," she said, "even in loss, life finds a way to grow." Jonathan nodded, understanding that sometimes the most profound change comes not from wealth, influence, or control, but from empathy, trust, and the courage to believe in others. Her son ran to Jonathan, pulling him into a hug. "Thank you for helping my mom," he said simply. In that embrace, Jonathan felt the weight of years lift from his shoulders. He had come to the grave seeking solitude, but he found connection, forgiveness, and the quiet joy of watching someone he cared about rise above pain. As the sun rose higher, its light spilling over the memorial, Clara turned to Jonathan. "You taught me that kindness can change everything," she said. Jonathan smiled, knowing that the most meaningful legacy is not money, but the strength and courage we inspire in others. That day, the three of them stood together, a billionaire, a single mother and a child, united not by circumstance but by hope, resilience, and love. The grave no longer symbolized only loss. It had become a beacon of transformation, a reminder that even the deepest sorrow can give rise to new beginnings. And as they walked away, side by side, each step echoed with the promise that no challenge was too great, no grief too heavy, and no future too uncertain for those willing to believe in themselves and in the transformative power of love.